Hey everyone, before starting tonight's tale, I wanted to just thank you so much for your support and excitement about my channel. It's been immensely heartwarming and validating to see the vision I have is appreciated. I'll be giving away a free Nightmare Narrations t-shirt to a random entrant at the end of the month. All you need to do to enter is share this channel on your Facebook or Instagram and tag me in the post. The links to both my accounts are in the details, as well as the site, nightmarenarrations.com. If you want to just order one at the link below, I'd greatly appreciate it as well. And with that, let's start the story. I just found out why the kids in my town are brutally killing their parents. Part 1. They called us the miracle generation. It's a well-known fact that our town has always struggled to have children. Nobody knows exactly why, but fertility problems have always been an issue. It's not like our population is dwindling. People were still born from IVF or shipped into town through a government program to create families. Mom had moved to the US with her parents when she was 20 years old, abandoning her Aussie family and starting anew. After finding the program, she was paid enough cash to put her into early retirement, and all she had to do was pick from several guys and make a family. I know this sounds very dystopian, and you would be correct in thinking so, but what else were they supposed to do? Children were seemingly not allowed in this town, and when by miracle they were somehow allowed to exist, they lasted maybe 3 or 4 days. Mom said I was a miracle baby. It wasn't supposed to happen because women in our town were supposed to be barren. So, when an entire class of babies came out of nowhere, that is what our town named us. Miracles. I was born first, followed by my twin brother a day later, and then my sister a whole year after. I think my mom wanted to stay safe with 2 kids before she tried again, and lo and behold, she had Noah. We learned in school from an early age that we weren't technically supposed to exist. Scary to a child, yes. When an adult is prodding a whiteboard and repeating the words shouldn't and impossible, you are bound to get freaked out. Though the town was skeptical of us, there were those before us, babies who were born and given names and identities, and already had parents falling in love with their bundle of joy, only for each child to die one after the other from a mysterious illness no scientist could identify. It became pretty obvious that our town was cursed. Mom told me for the first few days after I was born, she wasn't allowed to hold me in case I spontaneously combusted in her arms or grew 3 heads. Yes, there is documented evidence that babies have spontaneously combusted or grown inhuman-like limbs before dying. Mom wanted to make sure I was actually real and not some cruel illusion. That went for all the babies in town. We were all taken to the hospital and placed inside a sort of quarantine room. They expected us to explode or die suddenly. But when we didn't, we were given back to our parents. Mom used to regularly put in our birthday cards, "I'm glad you didn't explode," as a joke. She had an odd sense of humor, but I thought it was cute. I have 17 years worth of birthday cards all saying the same ridiculous passage. Happy, insert age here, birthday Mara. I'm glad you didn't explode. Anyway, this supposed curse came back to light several days ago, when out of nowhere, Seth Daniels killed his parents. And I don't mean kill like he burned the house down within a minute or poisoned them in their sleep. I mean, kill According to the town newspaper my mom is always feverishly reading, the bodies were mutilated, like an animal had torn them apart. I knew Seth. I've known him since we were little kids. He lived across the road from me. Seth regularly invited me over to watch Power Rangers and would enthusiastically sing and dance to the intro. Seth loved his mom and dad. I mean, he did as a kid. I would see him playing with his father in their front yard. And when he grew up, yes, he distanced himself from his parents, because being cool with your mom and dad is like so lame. I would still see him accompanying his mother to the town center to buy groceries, or sitting in the yard playing his Switch, pretending to laugh at all of his dad's dad jokes. Seth wasn't a bad person, and he definitely wasn't a victim of some supposed curse that apparently still had us in its grasp. It didn't make sense that he would just kill his parents like that. There was no motive, no real reason for him to do that. Seth adored his mother and loved his father. The town media were radio silent, except for one measly article in the newspaper. I figured nobody wanted to say what everyone was thinking, but it didn't make sense. This curse had allowed us to live for 17 years, and now it wanted to do something, and why would it lash out at parents and not kids? Why force the kid to kill their parents? There was one detail that jumped out at me. It was Seth's 18th birthday, the exact day. I knew this because he was talking about having a party at school. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but what kid actively talks about having a birthday party the same day they're planning to brutally murder their parents? I asked a lot of questions because nobody was making noise, and I refused to believe Seth had willingly done something like this. Mom said that Daniel's case was too gruesome to tell me, so I did some digging myself. We're a small town. Finn Novak is the son of the sheriff, so it cost me $20 and a promise to introduce him to my brother to get into his dad's office. It was very cloak and dagger. I definitely felt like one of those TV detectives. The documents were still fresh in the top drawer under his desk. Daniels. I picked up the folder, motioning for Finn to keep a lookout. He just tossed me a pissed look, but attempted to charm the receptionist into a conversation while I studied the autopsy notes. After skim reading them, I wished I could delete that information from my memory. Mara. I lifted my head, and the boy was making some pretty intense hand gestures worthy of a Saturday morning cartoon. Are you crazy? Get out of there. Before I could answer, he pointed behind him, his eyes wide. My dad is coming, he mouthed. Nodding, I stayed calm, despite my dancing gut. I took several photos of the notes, before swiftly leaving the room and closing the door behind me. It's not like Finn expressed any interest in what I was looking for, but he did sit with me on a bench in the middle of the town square. A Starbucks latte balanced on his lap. So, he leaned over, peeking at my phone, loudly slurping on his straw. What's the verdict? Did he kill them? I had a hard time answering without bringing up my meager breakfast. Yes, I said, staring at the photo on my phone's screen. Mom was right. The autopsy notes were gruesome, because there was barely anything to perform an autopsy on. In my mind, Seth had maybe stabbed his parents, but in reality he had ripped them apart. In the notes was a detailed description of the remains, which weren't much. A single torso and a head. That was it. Both victims were Sonia, 38, and Oliver, 39. Daniels. The images were black and white, and I could barely see them. just 2 square photos at the end of the notes. But they wouldn't leave my mind. A single head and torso. That was what was left of Seth's parents, which meant somehow he had the strength to rip them to shreds. I was already thinking it when I passed my phone to Finn, who hissed through his teeth. "Holy fuck," he muttered, passing me his empty cup, squinting at the screen. Crazy asshole actually butchered them. He didn't butcher them. I managed to get out despite knowing I was in denial. I couldn't defend Seth when the evidence was right there in black and white, having not just killed them, but dismembered them in a way no human, even a genius serial killer, could. This was more animalistic. The more I was thinking about it, the sicker I was getting. It wasn't until my mouth was filling with barf, and I was on my hands and knees choking up my guts, that the gravity of the situation slammed into me. If Seth Daniels had killed his mom and dad out of nowhere, was that fate going to take me too? It must have been the curse. There was no other explanation. I didn't dig into the rest of the investigation because I was terrified of finding something I didn't want to. Murder, motivated by emotion and motive, is awful, yes, but can be understood. It's been studied since records began why we kill. But when it comes to a separate force taking control of your will and forcing you to kill, that's when there are no real answers, only questions. Our town had been plagued with an invisible force that had taken away our children. Could it be that we had angered it? By being born, had we somehow pissed off this all-seeing God? It was only several days later when Mom told me Seth had been taken to the juvenile detention center and didn't even get a court case. He admitted it automatically. "Yes, I killed my mom and dad," were his words when he was forced from his house with his arms bound behind his back, a pair of Ray-Bans hiding his eyes from the world. His words were so cruel, so unforgiving, and yet spoken with an emotionless drone. He didn't care. Watching him being swarmed by town news crews from my window, Seth almost resembled a celebrity, the way he was shoved through flashing lights and microphones. Seth Daniels hated attention, usually. If he was picked to speak in class, his cheeks would go bright red, and he'd stumble his way through the passage trying not to cry. The boy I saw was not my neighbor. This version of him held his head high, his movements swift and robotic as he calmly jumped into the back of an awaiting SUV. Despite seeing all of that, despite seeing Seth seemingly uncaring in front of the cameras, I knew he would never do something like that. I know murderers turn out to be the most unexpected people. Friends and family, those you grow up with and trust. But there was something about the Daniels case that I couldn't get out of my mind. Mom told me to forget about it when I started asking her questions about this so-called curse and how exactly I was born. Over dinner, I asked a few too many before she dropped her fork onto her plate, startling my twins sitting across from me. Electronics were not allowed at the table, but Freddie was the more favored child, so the rules didn't apply to him. It stung a little, but I couldn't really blame Mom for being obsessed with her only son. Apparently, she had been told she had twin daughters, and out came Freddie, so he was a surprise to her. Freddie was such a surprise that he got what he wanted for birthdays, while Noah and I were stuck with the hand-me-downs. His nickname was Golden Boy, because apparently he could do no wrong. I was sure if he murdered me in my sleep, Mom would give him a candy bar. Freddie and I were fraternal twins and looked nothing alike. But that didn't stop Mom attempting to dye my hair when I was little, so I would have Freddie's red locks. I have natural brown hair, while he is a redhead, and Noah is blonde. Normal people would question that, But in our town, it was pretty normal for kids to not like their parents due to the lengths people went to have kids. I had heard rumors that the miracle generation was created from witchcraft. But the person who spread that rumor also thought the earth was one giant tomato. It was the first time since learning about the curse as a kid that I started to actually question it, much to Mom's disdain. Freddie had already told me to cut it out with the questions, kicking me under the table. But once I was asking them, I couldn't stop. So much was on my mind. Seth's mental state seemed to be fine. He wasn't suicidal or struggling or having bad thoughts. At least that's what it seemed like from the outside looking in. It doesn't make sense, I had said for the third or fourth time, well aware I was hyperfixating on this. Why now? I forked pasta into my mouth, ignoring my twin's glare. If we are cursed, why wait a whole 17 years later? Mara. Mom cleared her throat, her lips pausing on the rim of her wine glass. When Dad worked late, Mom pulled out the wine. We weren't supposed to tell him. What did I tell you about discussing business that is not ours? But it is my business, I said. Seth was my friend. He was my friend. Freddie had already finished his dinner, occasionally glancing down at his switch. You didn't even like him. Do you remember when you called him an asshole? This time, I kicked him, and from the way he jumped in his seat, his eyes widening for the fraction of a second, it hurt him. We were 12, and he stole my doll. You still called him an a-hole, Freddie said in a sing-song, his gaze flicking back to his game. I actually played with him, and he only paid attention to you because he wanted to play on your DS. You called him a big-nosed freak, I spat back. So did you. Noah, our more well-behaved little sister, ducked her head to hide her laughter. That's enough. Mom, who was halfway through a bottle of wine, slammed the glass down on the table. Her eyes found mine. Mara, if you ask one more question about the Daniels case, I will take your phone for a week. Freddie snickered, but she snapped at him too. That goes for you too. She stood up. I'm going upstairs. Whoever is on the rota, please clean the dishes and make the kitchen tidy before your father comes home. Freddie huffed like a child, folding his arms. What about Noah? He gestured to her. She was laughing. I was not. Noah squeaked. I could tell by the sudden noise, which escaped my brother's mouth. Our little sister had joined me in my assault. Mom didn't reply, taking her glass of wine and the whole bottle and slinking upstairs as usual. We were used to it. Every night when Dad was at work, Mom abandoned us at the dinner table and did the same ritual she had been doing since we were little kids. Armed with nothing but wine and a candle, Mom would lock herself in her bedroom until the early hours of the next morning. When we were 10, Freddie and I attempted to sneak in and see what she was doing. But at that point, and that late into the night, Mom had fallen asleep on the floor, the candle still flickering away. That night was the same. Mom disappeared all night, and I took it upon myself to clean away the dishes. Freddie went to hang out with friends, and Noah practically goes brain dead once she's on TikTok. Mom had a strict rule. No matter what, we had to hand our phones in at 11 p.m. every night. That included all electronics, including switches. In fact, she went as far as switching off the outlets in our rooms. So that meant no late-night games of Mario Kart. I thought we would eventually be able to grow out of the rule. But no. We were 16 and 17 years old and still had to hand over our phones like preschoolers. Freddie was, of course, the golden boy. So he had left his phone and switch on the kitchen table before leaving for his friend's house. which Mom also said wasn't allowed, but I guess that rule didn't apply to him. I was sitting on the kitchen countertop, frowning at my phone screen, reading and rereading through the Daniels autopsy notes, when Noah let out a shriek. The time was 11:01, which meant Noah was already breaking the no phone rule. I jumped off of the countertop, pausing to throw my phone next to Freddie's before the thought hit me. Why was my first automatic thought to put my phone down? I tried to pocket it before a pulsing pain suddenly ignited between my fingers. It felt like an electric shock, only lasting a few seconds, maybe not even that. My phone slipped from my hands, but not before the lights above flickered before going out completely, leaving me in darkness. Fuck. The warm glow of the hallway outside confirmed just the kitchen had short-circuited. Mom had always been antsy about technology altogether. She only got us phones because we had begged, and Freddie had bought his Switch himself with cash from his part-time job. My gaze found my mostly okay iPhone lying face down on pastel pink tiles. I reached to pick it up before that same pain, this time writhing up my index finger. Mara. Noah's squeak came from the lounge. I found her sitting on the floor, her phone in her hands. Her eyes were wide, her lips stretched into a grin. "Look," she whispered. Following her gaze, my sister was grasping her phone. I saw nothing interesting. She was watching a YouTube video, some kind of video essay on serial killers. What? It's charging. At first, I had no idea what she was talking about, before my gaze found the charging symbol at the top of her screen, a lightning bolt indicating the charger being inserted. But when I followed Noah's pointer finger, I glimpsed her iPhone charger on the other side of the room, still plugged into the outlet. Noah was shaking with anticipation. "Wait, that's not even the best part," she squeaked. "Look what happens if I let it go." My sister dropped the phone, and the symbol disappeared. She picked it back up, and the charging indicator flashed. Initially, I thought she was playing some kind of trick, but she did it again, and then again, and I realized I wasn't seeing things. The phone was charging itself without a charger. Noah, being Noah, automatically thought she had some kind of superpower. My little sister jumped to her feet and strode over to the television, prodding the screen, only for nothing to happen. Then she tried the lamp on the stand in the PlayStation 4. Nothing. I admit, I was kind of excited for maybe a full minute before I realized there was most likely a scientific explanation. And there was, according to an article I found online. Yes, electronic devices can charge their batteries through various methods without being plugged into a source of electricity. What all the different methods have in common is that they absorb energy that is in some other form: heat, light, vibrations, radio waves, etc., from the external environment, and then convert the energy into electrochemical energy that is stored in the device's batteries. Still, though, according to the author of the article, it usually wasn't enough power to make a difference. So why had Noah's phone been actually charging? I watched the percentage jump from 10% to 16%. I put it down to a malfunction. It made sense if I really thought about it. The next day, however, did not make sense. I was still half asleep when I awoke to my brother looming over me. "What is it?" Freddie waved the phone in my face. "Just read it." I did, skimming through the messages, each one sending my gut hurtling further and further and further into my throat. There was a sea of gray messages from the recipient, and only 2 messages in blue from Freddie. "Skinned off flesh. It was gnarly. Mrs. Kane fainted, and my mom had a fucking panic attack. Skull completely pulverized. I can't believe I saw this shit, man. What the fuck? There are people guarding the scene now, but earlier you could just fucking walk in. Animal. Crazy fucking psycho. The living room was covered in blood, like a horror movie. My guy painted the fucking walls. There was nothing left on the stretcher they brought out, just skin. There was like blue sheets over the body, but there wasn't even a body. I think I saw a hand or maybe a foot, but they definitely weren't attached. I don't know, it was fucking gross. Mom wants to send me to therapy, LMAO. My brother finally replied in blue. Who was it? Sheriff's son, came the reply. That kid is going to hell, and I'm an atheist. I hope he gets his karma, because who does that? Wasn't he close to his pop? Jesus fucking Christ. I can't get my head around it. It took a moment for the messages to sink in, and I was out of bed before my brain could catch up with my body. Finn. In 3 strides, I was on my knees, choking up dust. Freddy dropped down onto my bed with a hissed breath. Didn't you know that kid? He whispered. That was Finn, right? His words weren't fully registering. This time, I did bring something up. Something sour and slimy spluttering from my lips, my stomach heaving. You okay? No. Do you? Want me to help? No. I swiped at my mouth, but it kept coming. This time bouts of stomach lining filling my mouth. Did you check? I managed to choke out, spitting out barf. Huh? Did you check? I said slowly, spacing out my words, to see if it was Finn. Oh yeah, it was him all right. The cops already caught him. Apparently he was trying to make a run for it, Freddy's side. Maybe he was scared. It didn't make sense. How could Finn kill his father? He loved his dad. I barely knew the kid outside helping me with getting into his dad's office. But even then, I saw photo frames on Sheriff Novak's desk. I saw photos of the 2 of them for Christmas and Father's Day, on vacations and just the 2 of them hanging out. In kindergarten, a boy had loudly announced that Sheriff Novak was a pig, and Finn wrestled him to the ground, almost knocking the kid out. Finn was tiny, a lean kid. There was no way he was strong enough to rip his father apart. Fuck, Freddy groaned. He hung upside down off of the bed, twisting his head to look at me, blowing dark red hair out of his eyes. Are we cursed? That was the first time I found myself nodding, my thoughts dizzy. But that didn't stop me trying to talk to him. According to Mom, Finn was being shipped to juvenile detention at noon. Until then, he was locked up downtown. Sheriff Novak was dead, so the town's law enforcement were at that point trying to find a new sheriff. The place was heaving for most of the morning before people started to disperse. I took my chance, sneaking in with a group of parents screaming about the safety of their kids, while the lady behind the counter was trying to calm them down. I took my chance, sliding through the door at the back and into the cells. I expected guards, but they were nowhere to be seen. I figured the mess with the parents had given me the perfect distraction. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was the flickering light, but it wasn't the lights above. In front of the cells was an empty desk with a laptop set up. Stepping closer, I realized it was the laptop's screen, which was flickering erratically. When the bulb above shattered, I jumped. Mara. Finn's voice resembled Seth's, an emotionless drone. When I twisted around, I glimpsed the boy standing with his hands wrapped around the bars, very Silence of the Lambs. Finn liked horror movies, so I wouldn't have been surprised if he was jokingly reenacting that certain scene, though that would have required him having an ounce of emotion. I'm not sure what I expected, but this wasn't it. I thought Finn would be hysterical, screaming that he was innocent, that he would never kill his father. But what I was looking at was the face of a murderer, or at least half of one. His lips were curved into a small smile, and yet that smile held no emotion. Just like Seth, Finn's eyes were shaded with a pair of Ray-Bans. These ones looked more expensive, clashing with a simple short-sleeved tee and jeans, both of which were stained in his father's blood. When I opened my mouth to speak, his arms dropped to his sides. "Aren't you going to wish me a happy birthday?" The wriggling legs of a phantom spider crept down my spine, and I found myself taking a step towards him, my breath in my throat. "It's your birthday?" He nodded. "I turned 18 yesterday. Wish me a happy birthday." "Happy birthday," I whispered, and the words tangled on my tongue. "Did you? I killed my dad," Finn finished for me, in the exact same tone as Seth. No empathy, nothing to suggest he regretted what he had done. I was seeing this identical expression in the sheriff's son. He didn't move, staying eerily still, his arms frozen by his sides. I pulled out his lungs and cut off his head. I skinned him to the bone and dumped his guts in the toilet bowl to hide them. But I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. You didn't mean..." Finn cut me off, slicing into my spiraling thoughts. I felt faint, like I was going to throw up again. "When is your birthday again?" he asked, with no hint of curiosity. The question was simple, and yet it was enough to send me backing into cold concrete walls. "When is your birthday?" "Why?" His expression didn't waver. "When is your birthday?" "June 23rd, I answered through a breath. Finn didn't move for a moment before slowly slipping off his Ray-Bans. I thought he was doing some dramatic reveal, like he was some character in a noir film, and was going to describe in detail just what exactly he had done to his father, but instead, his arms slipped to his sides, the sunglasses dropping to the ground and revealing where his eyes used to be, now twin caverns of pooling darkness, which somehow still held glitters of life. I couldn't stop myself. I was taking steps towards him, peering into the dim light of his cell. And yes, I wasn't seeing things. Finn's eyes were gone, plucked from his skull. From the trauma around both of them, the removal had been forceful. "Happy birthday," he said in that same dull, toneless drawl. When I drew back, he bent down and felt for the glasses, grasping hold of them and sliding them back on. "For the 23rd, I mean." Finn pressed his face against the bars, this time with a manic giggle which came out of nowhere. His expression was still vacant, yet his lips split into the grin of a man who had murdered his father in cold blood and did not give a fuck. "I'm looking forward to you join me." That was when I left him. But before I could shut the door, his chilling words followed me. "And your brother."